you want to go?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Senator Lee was here first, actually. I didn't see you come back in, Senator Lee.
Thank you.
Senator Lee, go ahead, and then we'll go to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for being here and for your willingness to serve. Mr. Landau, I'd like to start with you, if that's all right. You've spoken today about the need to restore statecraft, economic statecraft, as a core function of the U.S. State Department. You've also acknowledged this administration has been clear-eyed about the need to rethink and revisit certain aspects of foreign aid and how it works. But getting back to economic statecraft, would you agree that the tools available to the United States in the economic statecraft domain, including things like trade agreements and other efforts that involve reducing trade barriers, arguably have a better return on investment for us than foreign aid in the traditional sense, and should perhaps be our primary line of effort?
Senator Lee, I appreciate that question. I think that is such an important point to underscore, that there's probably no force in the world that is as powerful as the American private sector. And if we are looking to increase prosperity abroad, I think we'll get a much higher rate of return from helping private sector money find its way to places where the private sector knows how best to spend it and how best to get returns. Not to say there's not a role for USAID, but I think looking at this, for maybe for too long, for decades, we've looked at this as American taxpayers sending aid dollars abroad. I would love to focus on how do we get the American private sector to improve the standard of living of countries abroad by investing, by increasing flows of capital to some of those other countries so they can build economy. Again, we saw that in China. There's no more powerful force than free market systems when those are operating. So again, I think your insight is a very important one. That's not to say there's not a role for certain government programs, and that's fine. But in terms of State Department resources, I think we have severely underinvested in the kind of programs you're talking about.
People want to trade with the United States, and they benefit meaningfully from it. Their people benefit meaningfully from it. And so insofar as we can use that, that can really go a long way. It can make a really big difference. Mr. Whitaker, I'd like to go to you next. It is, in my view, in the view of many, including within the current administration, far past time for our NATO allies to take their own defense, their own security needs seriously. And the President, of course, has called for our allies to spend 5% of GDP on defense. Now, defense spending is at least in part driven by threat perceptions, by what people perceive as necessary in order to keep themselves safe. And the perception of a threat risk may vary a little bit between the East Bloc and the West Bloc, sort of within NATO, and it varies also depending on which side of the Atlantic Ocean you might be on. Defense spending is also a decision that is, of course, necessarily subject to domestic processes, to domestic scrutiny, to engagement, normally with the elected representatives, people who are elected to make law in their respective countries. In light of all these factors, how achievable, how reconcilable, how gettable is this sort of return to a proper burden shifting in light of all the challenges that we face there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Senator. I enjoyed our time yesterday to talk about this. For a few minutes, it seemed like a couple of lawyers nerding out on the law, but I did enjoy the discussion.
It was kind of like that, I guess, wasn't it? Yeah.
But that being said, you're right. Defense spending is subject to domestic political concerns, and for too long, our European allies and Canada, many of them, have balanced their budgets of their domestic political concerns on the backs of the American taxpayer, who has taken our place in the world as the only superpower very seriously and has invested in our defense. And obviously, if confirmed, when I get over there, I look forward to the conversation with all of the members on this committee about whether or not our NATO allies are really committed to the alliance. They say they are. They say, but again, are these politicians just providing empty promises, or are they actually stepping up, understanding that the world is dangerous and the U.S. is their best ally in a dangerous world?
Right. And that the U.S. is their best ally, albeit an ally that they're ready to cast aside the minute they decide to hold side meetings that don't include us when they're upset with us. But regardless, we have been bearing a disproportionate share of their security umbrella for a very long time. It's been good for them insofar as their objective has been an inexorable march toward Western European-style socialism, but that doesn't necessarily make it fair to the United States of America or her taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lee. And Mr. Whitaker, let me say that if you're going to have a conversation to nerd out